Like Darlene said, I'm Eric. I'm the pastor here. I just want to thank you for being here today, especially if you're watching online. And it was a tough week this week. In a 24-hour period, I had an axe in the garage. There's a reason why they put covers on axes, because it fell on my foot and cut it very badly. And then that night, got word that my dad passed. And then the next morning, I had a root canal. And I thought, a colonoscopy could have rounded this out really nicely. Good way to finish. So I love this. I love the yearbook. Didn't you like that? I found it fitting because I don't know if you know this, but Choctaw's prom was here last night. I think it's cool that all three high schools, Choctaw, Niceville, Fort Walton, they're having their proms here. Choctaw had it last. We got two more in the next 2 weeks. I think it's cool that high schools want to hold their prom in a church. But it made me think, I wonder if there was any hookups here last night. I came in this morning, I said, I hope nobody hooked up in my office in there, because that is not a good thing. And that's, I thought, very fitting for our series, Hookup, right? And of course, we're talking about that because everybody's hooked up before. Come on, some of you are hooking up right now. And of course, it means a lot of different things. Pastor Donnie, what a great message last week. Donnie, great, super creative. I'm so proud of you. Anyways, there's a lot of we think differently when it comes to hearing the word hooked up. You know, for you, it might be sex. It might be just dating. Maybe you hear your teenagers talking about so-and-so hooked up with so-and-so. And, you know, is it dating? Is it sex? Whatever it is. You know, Donnie brought this up. Maybe when you hear the term hooked up, you're thinking of someone who's hooked you up with some tickets, you know? Like, hey, my buddy's a cable guy. Hook me up with some free cable. Or, you know, hook me up with tickets to the Marlin Classic or something like that, you know. So getting in on the hookup. Donnie also talked about this. Talked about when you hook up with old friends that you haven't seen since high school or college. Well, we, hook up with some friends. We went out to dinner and stuff like that. But the one thing that Donnie missed was fishing. Hello. You get hooked up. That's right. You know, you're fishing. I'm hooked. I'm on. I got a hook. I'm hooked up on a fish, right? I love that. So there's a lot of connotations when it comes to hooking up. A lot of differences. We think of different things. But I kind of want to focus on that fishing thing in a minute, because how many people have ever been on a charter boat, been charter fishing? All right. You have a deckhand on there, right? And what's the deckhand's job? The deckhand is not only to make sure that you get hooked up, but he's also there to make sure that you get unhooked, right? Especially if it hooks you in the. Don't you love fishing with someone and they hook you? But unhooking the fish, because there's an art to unhooking the fish. They got one of those D-hookers, right? And they got to kind of twist it and do the line, and the fish drops off. If it's too small or it's out of season, you want to release the fish, or you want to throw it into the fish box, right? But sometimes it's almost easier to get hooked up than it is to get unhooked. And that's what I want to talk about today, is focusing on what it takes to unhook out of unhealthy relationships. Anybody remember in 1984, there was a movie out. It was Tom Cruise's breakout movie, Risky Business. Anybody remember that? Yes, I'm showing a picture of Tom Cruise in his underwear in church. It's just, I'm grieving. So anyway, and if you remember, the whole premise of this movie was Tom Cruise's character, I don't remember his name, lived in a rich suburb of Chicago. His parents went out of town, and he somehow got hooked up with a call girl. And the whole movie is kind of, throughout the movie, he has trouble unhooking from her and her friends and her pimp. So sometimes it's easier to get hooked up than it is to get unhooked. And then why would you want to get unhooked? What if a relationship is not working? What do you do with an employee or a business associate or a relationship, a romantic relationship, when it's not working out? You know, what do you do if there's unhealthiness in the relationship, abusive behavior, a dysfunctional behavior, you know, where you're trying to figure out whether you should stay in the relationship? Because in my line of work, I hear the stories all the time. I see it all the time. So what about when you need to get unhooked? Because maybe you know someone in an abusive or dysfunctional relationship, and they don't know what to do. They're asking you, I don't know, should I stay? Should I try to work it out? What if he never changes? What if she never changes? So that's a question that comes up all the time. Is staying hooked up worth it in a relationship that seems detrimental or that can be dangerous? How do I know if it's going to help? Is it ever going to get better? Is he ever going to change? Is she ever going to change? Is it worth it for me to keep working on the relationship when it seems like there's never going to be any improvement? In all my efforts, is there going to be any change at all? Now, pretty much I can deduce that most of you here, you are responsible and loving people. Pretty much, I know that because you go to Shoreline Church. And so what we do, those of us who are responsible and loving people, we just naturally assume that everybody is like us, right? That they're responsible and loving, that people want to do the right thing, that people are going to take responsibility for their actions. They're going to take responsibility for their work, for their mistakes. That you have concern about what you do and how it affects other people. So doesn't it make sense that everybody else on earth would think that way, that people would really care and they're concerned? But it doesn't always work that way. If you're going to succeed in life and in business, you have to succeed here on earth. The truth is, not everybody on planet Earth is like you. Not everybody cares. Not everybody is responsible. So how do we know who is worth investing time and energy and resources in and who's not? I mean, because how do we know when a release is required that I really need to cut off this relationship? I need to end this thing, because none of us have crystal balls. We don't know what people are going to do in the future. I mean, I'm a pretty good judge of characters, and I don't normally pick up hitchhikers, but I got a good feeling about you. Just hop in. Anybody? The greatest movie of all time? Dumb and Dumber. Come on. Oh, anyway. How do you know? Because we've all seen it. We've seen someone that we've thought was rock solid, good character. Everyone thought that, and to see it go south and ruin people's lives and ruin relationships. And usually there were signs that they didn't see or didn't want to see. But on the same time, on the flip side of that coin, I have seen absolute train wrecks turn it around and become rock stars. Now, nobody. And I certainly won't do it. I can't claim that I know for certain what someone is going to do in the future. But exactly 10 years ago, it was a night just like tonight. No, 10 years ago, we were bringing a boat back from St. Thomas to Florida. And so we'd stopped off in the southern Bahamas and spent some time there. And we were on our way to Marathon, going to sail back to Marathon, which is about a 3-day sail. And so we leave the Great Bahama Bank. I've got a little chart of it so you can see what it looks like. You look up there on the right, you see the Bahamas. That's the Great Bahama Bank. And it takes about 24 hours for us to sail across the Great Bahama Bank, which is equivalent. It's like sailing across Crab Island for 24 hours. It's 8 to 10 foot deep and just beautiful emerald crystal clear water. You can see fish down there. You can see everything. And then once we leave the Great Bahama Bank, you can see around that red circle, there's about halfway between that and the Keys is a place called Sal Bank. And Sal Bank is nothing but a little reef area with a couple of scraggly looking uninhabited islands that's sticking out. And so what our plan was to leave the Great Bahama Bank at nightfall, sail 12 hours, get to the Great Sal Bank right when the sun's coming up, spend the day there lobstering and fishing, and then as the sun's going down, we'll make the overnight sail to Marathon and hopefully arrive in Marathon as the sun's coming up, and that way we have all our landfalls there in the daytime, we can get some lobstering and fishing done. So, we're sailing this 37-foot boat, and the boat's equipped with weather radar as well as satellite radar. And so as we're getting closer towards the Sal Bank in the middle of the night, we're looking at the satellite radar, and we can see this huge cold front moving across the southern United States, moving through Destin and stuff, and it's tracking its way down there. And anybody who's a mariner that's ever crossed the Gulf Stream know the Gulf Stream is not a place to be when the wind turns out of the north at high speeds like a cold front. So we decided that we were going to skip the Sal Bank, and we're going to head straight over to Marathon and hopefully get there before it gets dark and we can beat this cold front. Unfortunately, we didn't beat the cold front. It came in, and it came in howling, wind and rain, 6 to 8 foot seas. I just want to give you we're towing a little skiff behind us. I want you to see how big these swells really are, because it's hard to tell. They're right there. You can see that's getting pretty tall in there. So we had these huge confused seas. There was, it was raining. We actually heard 4 maydays from different vessels from Coast Guard Key West. But it ended up only being like 6 hours of just being cold and wet and uncomfortable. And we finally cruised into Marathon right before the sun went down. We had some flat water as we were getting in there. But here's the thing. We made a decision to press on because we didn't want to be stuck on the Sal Bank when this front came through. And the reason why we were able to make a good decision from it is because we had satellite weather and satellite radar. And I mean, Yeah, so there's a difference. We were able to get on the satellite and see the weather, what's coming across the southern U.S., but we also had satellite radar weather so that we could see the systems as they're on the horizon and coming towards us. And so we're able to make the right decision and to press on. Here's the good news, and here's why I bring this up. There is a weather satellite system for judging people, for helping you determine character traits or determine character that will, if used correctly, you can be right more times than you are wrong. And you can, if you'll learn to use this system that I'm going to teach you today, it will serve you well, and you will save massive amounts of time, energy, resources, money, all of that stuff, so that you don't end up throwing energies into a relationship that's not going to work out. And this will give you the most accurate predictions for your ability to diagnose character. And once you learn how to diagnose character, it can give you hope that somehow, because maybe you're stuck in a relationship that you've talked and you've talked and you've talked and nothing seems to change. How can you know whether tomorrow will be different? This system that I'm going to give you today will help you determine that maybe tomorrow will be better, and this is the person that you should invite into your future. Or when you see these other traits, maybe give you reason that there isn't hope, and maybe this one needs to be someone that you used to know. Because unless something changes, and we're going to find out, because a lot of people say, well, you can't change people, but we're going to see today is that when change can occur, and a lot more depends on you than you realize. So what we're going to look at is there's basically three types of people. You might say three styles of behavior that people can exhibit at any particular time, okay? Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can say this, but they're basically the same three categories, but they might have different language around them, whether you're a psychotherapist, a parole officer, a teacher, a parent, a spouse, whatever. You might use different words for these, but they are actually the same category, kind of the same categories emerge when it comes to people's behavior. So the categories or the words that I want to use come out of the book of Proverbs. Now, I love it because right now, if you are following along with our SOAP devotions, and if you don't know what SOAP is, let me just tell you, download the app like Darlene said. There's a whole lot of things that you can get off this app, including the notes for today's message. And Donnie's message last week was very fun and story-filled. This is going to be more nuts and bolts. So you're going to either want to take notes, because some of you are in a relationship like this, some of you have been in a relationship like this, or you might end up in a relationship like this, and you need to know whether it's worth investing time and money into this relationship and whether it can work. So I encourage you to download the app because all the notes are going to be on here. Now, other thing that's on here is SOAP, and SOAP is a devotion that we as a church kind of do every day, not together. You just read a chapter of the day, and we happen to be in Proverbs. So today, we're going to be in Proverbs. All our scriptures are coming out of Proverbs, which is a book in the Old Testament that was written by a man named Solomon, among some other authors, and it's considered some of the best wise sayings to help live your life by. Now, I love these three categories, but here's something that you have to remember. As we look at these three categories, you have to remember this, that because there's three different behavior models, what motivates these three types of models is different, okay? What that means is there's no single way to get someone, you can't deal with everybody the same way, okay? You have to realize because there's different people in different categories, they're going to require different strategies. For example, if you try to deal with a foolish person, which is going to be one of our categories, like you're dealing with a wise person, it's going to drive you crazy. Because you're going to lose time and heart and energy because you're going to be dealing with the same thing over and over. If you try to deal with a vindictive person, which is another one of our categories, if you try to deal with them at all, you're going to find out you could lose your business or your life. So it's essential that you understand very quickly what type of person you're dealing with so that you can take the appropriate measures. So let's start out with the first category. Let me give you an example. I have a friend, very successful businessman, and some years ago, his business started to experience exponential growth where he was able to expand into other states, and he was doing very well. But he also had a personality that a guy like him requires. You know, you've met him before, people who are entrepreneurs, they're business people, they're quite driven. And so because he was quite driven, and of course businesses run in seasons and cycles, he was in this cycle where there was a lot of growth happening. And being the driven person that he was having to make some decisions that were best for his company. But the decisions that he was making, because he's kind of a driven person, he doesn't look back and see the people in his wake, was affecting some of his associates, whether it be employees or partners that he was working with in business, other businesses, was affecting him in some unpleasant ways. And he didn't know about it. And so he didn't know that he was actually burning some long-term relational bridges that he had. And so we ended up in a long conversation. He was talking to me about the feelings of these sour relationships that he was in. And I told him what I saw from my perspective. I told him what I believed was causing these sour feelings that people were having, and I told him what I thought he should do. I told him the truth, and some of these things were very hard to hear. Some of them were hard for me to say. But being the person that he was, he took the feedback about himself, and he received it, and he used it and made some changes in a desire to grow to become a better person. See, there is hope for people who provide feedback or who are receptive to feedback. There's hope for people who are receptive to feedback who take ownership of where they need to grow. And that's what brings us to our first category, the one that Proverbs calls the wise person. Now, wise people learn from experience and make adjustments. So wise people are able to learn not just from their experience, but from other people's experience, and they're able to make adjustments. Let me give you some scriptures coming out of Proverbs about a wise person. Proverbs chapter 9 says, "Do not rebuke mockers." Now, mocker is another category we're going to look at. It is also interchangeable. Solomon interchanges it with the evil person, a vindictive person, and a wicked person. All of those are interchangeable. But for now, let's just look at it. Do not rebuke mockers, or they will hate you. Look at rebuke the wise, and they will love you. What's rebuke? It's correction. It's going, hey, here's what you're doing wrong. But then I love this next one. Instruct the wise, and they will be wiser still. So in other words, a wise person receives the correction, and if you instruct them on how you can make it better, they will be even more wiser. Teach the righteous, and they will add to their learning. Here's another one, Proverbs chapter 10. The wise in heart accepts command, but a chattering fool, that's another one of our categories, comes to ruin. We'll look at that later. Proverbs 13, a wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a mocker or an evil or a vindictive person does not respond to rebukes. So the person who does well is ultimately the person who can not only learn from their own experience, but from the experience of others, take that learning, apply it to themselves, and then deliver results based on actions that come from that wisdom. Which brings us to the key diagnostic of a wise person. This is going to be in your notes. When truth delivers itself, the wise person sees the light, in other words, sees the instruction, however that light comes in, takes it in, and makes adjustments. The wise person, now understand that this diagnostic is about one thing only, one thing, and that is the ability to take feedback from someone else and make adjustments. Because when people respond to feedback, that means there's hope. That's why I love verse 9 where it says, instruct the wise and they become wiser. They become smarter. They become more full of wisdom. Now, here's the question. You're in a relationship. It's not going right. Maybe there's some abuse. Maybe there's some whatever, dysfunction. The question is, well, how do I know that I'm dealing with a wise person? Well, let me give you some traits of a wise person. This will work if you're a boss, a husband, wife, a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, parent. Here's the traits. When you give a wise person feedback, they listen, take it in, and adjust their behavior. We kind of already said that. Number 2, they embrace it positively. In other words, they embrace the feedback that you give them. They own their own performance. They own their problems and issues and take responsibility for them without excuses or blame. And just like my relationship with my friend, when you're dealing with a person like this, usually the relationship is strengthened as a result of you giving them feedback. Because they're like you. They empathize and express concern about the results that their behavior is having on you and the people you love. So they show remorse. They respond to feedback. They go into future-oriented problem-solving mode. They don't allow problems to continue and turn into patterns. So that's the traits of a wise person. What's the strategy? If you're dealing with someone who's a wise person, what do? The strategy for dealing with wise people, because listen, I understand. Sometimes you get in a relationship, whether it's an employee-boss relationship or a boyfriend-girlfriend romantic relationship, where you reach a point where it can feel hopeless. That is not a bad place to be. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But what does knowing that you're dealing with a wise person have to do with hopelessness? If you know that you're dealing with a wise person, it tells you whether or not more time is justified in finding out this person, if the relationship is going to work. And if you feel like you're dealing with a wise person because they have some of these traits, then your strategy is to keep talking, to keep conversations open, keep the conversation going, because it will help. Feedback helps a wise person. And so if they exhibit these character traits and you don't know what to do in the relationship, then I would keep striving towards the relationship, keep leaning in towards the relationship. Because if they're wise, they're going to use it and it's going to be better. Now let's look at the next category. The next category is the foolish person. Here's what Proverbs says about the fool. Proverbs 1, I love this. For first chapter of Proverbs, he starts talking about what wisdom is. Okay? And he says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge or wisdom. Now, it doesn't mean like being afraid of God. It means the admiration, respect, the knowledge that God is who he is, that there is a God and he is who he says he is. That's the beginning of wisdom. But fools, they despise wisdom instruction. They don't like wisdom and they don't like to be instructed. Proverbs 15, a fool spurns a parent's discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. Proverbs 23, do not speak to fools, for they will scorn your prudent words. And I love this last one, 26, as a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. Yes, I'm still junior high-ish. I love the word vomit. And I love this because we used to have two dogs. We had a pit bull and a basset hound. And the pit bull was super sweet, and the basset hound was mean as all get out. And I was walking the dog one day, both of them, and it was funny because the basset hound was old and he was this way, and the pit bull was young, pulling me this way, and I'd be walking like this, and someone, Karen came up to me who's out jogging and said, pit bulls should be illegal. I can't believe you're allowed to have a pit bull. And I said, why? Because they're mean and they attack people. And she bent down to pet the basset hound bit her. Anyway, I bring that up because one day I was working in the office and preparing a message at home, and my basset hound threw up on the floor. And I was like, So I go in the kitchen to get some paper towels to come back and clean it up, but he cleaned it up for me. That's what he did. He did do that. So, listen, the chief description of a wise person is that when light shows up, instruction, wisdom, whether it be through the word of God or a prayer or somebody talks to him, he looks at it, receives it, adjusts his behavior to align with the truth. The fool is just the opposite. The fool rejects feedback, resists it, explains it away, gives excuses, and does nothing. In fact, in short, this is kind of the big idea of the fool. The fool tries to adjust the truth so he does not have to adjust to the truth. Oh my God, that's Twitterable. Elon Musk will love that. He's trying to buy Nighttown right now, so why don't you just go ahead and tweet that out? I did respond back and said, I'll tell you what, 43 billion is a lot for Nighttown. I'll sell it for 43 million. All right? Million. You're like, you'd sell the church? Heck yeah, and then we'll go find some, I don't know. Did y'all see that thing about Elon Musk wanting to buy Shoreline and turn it back to Nighttown so they can have $20 all you can drink? We'll do it. We can give us $20. Everyone in here, give us $20. You can go drink as much coffee, soda you want, water you want. I don't care. Anyway, where was I talking about? So that's tweetable. The fool tries to adjust the truth so he doesn't have to adjust to the truth. See, opposite of how the wise person adjusts to the truth. In contrast, the fool adjusts the truth so that he doesn't have to do anything. So giving feedback to a fool is hopeless. It makes no sense to do this. Some of you know this from experience because you've had that gnawing feeling of having the same conversation with the same person over and over and over about the same issue. And you slowly sink into the frustration that nothing is going to change. And the whole time, it's not because you want to hurt them. You're just wishing that they would hear what you're trying to say because it would solve a problem to something that will make your relationship better. But you get nowhere, and you feel stuck. Here's what you need to understand, because the point of it is that is exactly what someone who is engaged in foolish behavior, defending against seeing the truth, is trying to accomplish. They are in a stance designed not to see the truth, designed not to embrace the truth, or to grasp it, or to adjust their behavior. So, here's the question. I know how Okay, I understand now how I know I'm hooked up with a wise person. How do I know if I'm hooked up with a foolish person? Well, I have some traits of a foolish person as well. Here they are. When given feedback, foolish people are defensive and immediately come back at you with a reason why it's not their fault. Some of you have dealt with that. Hey, I need to talk to you about how you handled this on the job. Well, they get defensive. It's not my fault. Somebody else did it. I could get da-da-da-da. Number two, they blame someone else. Unlike the wise person, talking through those issues will strengthen your relationship. When you're dealing with the foolish person, many times attempts to talk about a problem actually create more problems. They create conflict, alienation, and sometimes a breach in the relationship. Sometimes they not only blame others, they blame you, trying to turn it back on you. You'll find that they try to minimize it. Oh, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as you think it is. Oh, it's not a problem. Rationalize, giving reasons why their performance is understandable. See, that's another trait of a foolish person, is they never take ownership of the issue. In fact, their response usually has nothing to do with remorse or regret. Instead, they even get angry at you for being on their case. You never believed in me. You never think I do anything right. You've never supported me. But there's little or no awareness or concern for the ramifications their behavior is having on you or your family or the relationship or the mission of the company. So the stance of a foolish person is opposite of a wise person when it comes to getting corrected. Because the wise person shows appreciation for when you give them correction or instruction, and they thank you for taking the effort to share it, and they try to do something about it. A foolish person sees themselves as the victim when you come to them. In fact, they see the people confronting them as accusers or persecutors for pointing out the problem. So the important thing to recognize, this is kind of the overall thing, if you want to go, how do I know when I'm dealing with a foolish person, is in all these traits is a lack of ownership of the issues and a refusal to take responsibility, to change their behavior. It's not my fault. It's always someone else. It's always someone else. They always want someone else to change. So here's the strategy, okay? So you know the traits, all right? How do I know I'm dealing with? Well, we know what they are. Here's the strategy for dealing with the foolish person, is to stop talking. That's it. Stop talking about the problem. Why? Because talking with the fool about the problem doesn't help. So therefore, further talking about the problem will not help anymore. So stop talking, at least about the problem. Because what's the definition of crazy? Anybody know? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So why would we think that the 64th time that I talked about it, when 63 times didn't do anything, why would 64 suddenly be the magic number that fixes everything? In fact, guys, we have a technical term for this. What do we call it? Nagging, right? Stop nagging me. It doesn't work. So it's time to quit talking about the problem, and it's time to have a different conversation. Stop talking about that problem. Stop talking about the effect that their behavior is having on you, the drinking or the abuse or the verbal abuse, whatever it is. Stop talking about that and start talking about a new problem. And the new problem that you're supposed to be talking about now is the fact that they won't change, that nothing helps, that talking about the problem doesn't help. So it's time to talk about the fact that nothing is happening, and that is the new problem. So here's the strategy for dealing with a foolish person. Not only do you stop talking, but you have two very important interventions: limits and consequences. Okay? First of all, what you do is you stop talking about the problem and you start setting limits on what you will allow yourself to be exposed to in terms of collateral damage that happens because of their behavior. So you might say something like this: Keith, your anger is very hurtful to me. I will not allow myself to be yelled at anymore. The next time it happens, I will leave. What I am doing is now setting limitations of what I'll be exposed to. Roger, maybe in a business, you got a team in a business and you're like, look, guy, the environment that I'm trying to build, the team camaraderie is very important to me. I will not tolerate abusive behavior. What you're doing is you're limiting what you will allow, okay? So you're making boundaries or limits. This is how you deal with the foolish person. Don't talk about the problem. The new thing is I'm going to set limits and consequences. And consequences are for their sake because it may be the thing that gets them to turn around. You may have to say something like, Dave, I want to live in a sober house, and since you've chosen not to do anything about your addictions, I will be moving out until you get counseling and become sober. So you've set limits, and then you set consequences, and then you keep the consequences. Because you can't control them, you can't make them change, but what you can do is create an ending that shows the effect of their refusal to take responsibility for their actions and the effect that it's having on other people. And when you do this, you may actually do the thing that could influence them to change, because more talking won't do it. This will cause them to feel the consequences of their behavior to what may finally be the thing that turns them around. This is why it's so important for you to recognize, am I dealing with a wise person or am I dealing with a foolish person? Because once you understand that if you are honest with yourself and you go through these questions and you go through these traits and you go, wow, the person I'm dealing with is foolish, you know now there has to be an ending. It could be an ending with the person, you have to break up or whatever it is. But at least, the very least, that there would be an ending to allowing the behavior to affect you or those you love. Because you need to know that tomorrow can be different than today. And if tomorrow is not any different than today, then you need to find a way. Because listen, when someone's not taking responsibility for their actions, there's always going to be consequences. The question is, who is suffering the consequences? In a relationship where someone's not owning their issues, somebody else suffers the consequences. The spouse, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the husband, the wife, the children, and that just creates a toxic culture. So when you're dealing with this kind of person, the only thing that gets their attention is when it's going to cost something. Because here's what you have to do. You have to transfer the need for them to change, because if you're still just talking about the problem, you feel the burden of the need to change. You need to take it off your shoulders and put it square on them. And the way you do that is by letting them feel the consequences. If they decide that I'm not going to make the changes, then they're going to feel the consequences, because they're the only one who can do anything about it. So if you're here this morning or you're watching online, you're in a relationship that's abusive, whether it be verbally, emotionally, sexually, whatever it is. Maybe you're in a relationship, a business relationship that's not working. It may be time for a new plan, because a new plan is one that gives you hope. See, when we get to a place of hopelessness, it's okay to be there, because it will cause you to come up with a new plan. And a new plan that limits the exposure of a foolish person's issues on you and forces them to feel the consequences may be the very thing that turns them around. And if it doesn't, they just become someone you used to know. And it's hard, I know, but you can't live this way, just like the song said. Let's look at the last category. The last category, if you probably guessed because I gave it away, is vindictive people. Also, again, in Proverbs, interchangeable with the mocker, evil, wicked. It's the third type of person. Now, instead of giving you a definition, I want to describe this type of person. It really happened to me in 2007 when because of the economy, which I think is going to come up again, everything just crashed, and so people were liquidating, get rid of stuff. We had a neighbor that had a house in Birmingham, a house in Destin. He had a couple of different boats, a Hatteras and another boat, and he was unloading his stuff, and we got a great deal on a fishing boat. And what he would do is he would come down, on weekends from Birmingham and use the boat and stay in his house. He ended up selling the house as well because he had to liquidate a lot of stuff. So we got a great deal on the boat. But about 6 months after I bought the boat, he calls me and says, hey, can I borrow the boat? We're coming down this weekend. I thought, no problem. Yeah, you can borrow the boat. Well, not too long after that, he does it again and again and again, a few more times. Finally, he senses my frustration, so he says, offers to buy half the boat back. We'll become partners on the boat. And I think about it, I'm like, why not? I mean, it's been good so far. I've been letting him use it. He comes down the weekends. I'm usually working on the weekends. I take the middle of the week off, and that way we can go fishing and stuff. So okay, I'll sell half the boat back to you. And it went south fast. There was a week I was out of town for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, I'm still up in Tennessee, up in the mountains. I get a nasty voicemail, saying that if I don't take better care of the boat, I won't be allowed to use it. I'm thinking, the boat isn't even your name. I haven't even formally made it a partnership. Legally, I own the boat still, even though he gave me half the money. But I'm thinking, what? I haven't even been home in 10 days. I haven't used the boat in 2 weeks. What do you mean if I don't take better care of it? Turns out what he did was he went fishing. Oh, because here's what the voicemail said. The voicemail said, you left the wahoo and bait in the live, a whole wahoo in the fish box. I'm like, I haven't even been using it. He went fishing, got blackout drunk, came back, didn't even remember that he had fish in the box, and didn't even remember going. So when he comes back the next weekend, thinks I left a whole wahoo in the fish box and the bait well was full of dead fish and thinks that I did it. It gets worse. What we would do is we'd change it out. Like he'd take the boat for the weekend. It'd be at his house. He just lived down the street from me. And so on the weekdays, I'd just go down and grab the boat. So I go down and get the boat after that call. And I go to crank it. It goes, I'm like, oh, no, he didn't. I dive under and there's a chain wrapped around the drive shaft with a padlock on it. So we tow it over to my house and we lift it up. And luckily, I know a locksmith. He comes and picks the lock. And I take the boat and I hide it in Fort Walton Beach. So when he comes back the next weekend, it's not at my house and I won't answer his calls. Well, I start getting voicemails that he's threatening to kill me. So we had to get an attorney and we just made sure all our firearms were locked and loaded and ready to go at our house if we saw him coming up the driveway. See, that's the vindictive person. That's the evil person, the mocker, the vindictive person. See, with the wise person, you talk to them and you give them resources and you get a return on that. With the foolish person, you stop talking to them about the problems because they're not listening. So you give them limits and consequences. For vindictive people, to quote a Warren Zevon song, the strategy is lawyers, guns, and money. And the reason is because you have to go into protection mode. You have to protect what you're dealing with when you're dealing with vindictive people. You need to protect yourself. Here's some of what Proverbs says about evil people. Proverbs 5 says, the evil deeds of the wicked ensnare them, and the cords of their sins hold them fast. Verse chapter 12, deceit is in the hearts of those who plot evil, but those who promote peace have joy. Chapter 16, a scoundrel plots evil on their lips and is like a scorching fire. I love this one. I think something's lost culturally in this one. Chapter 16, whoever winks with their eye is plotting perversity, and whoever purses with their lips is bent on evil. So all y'all doing those selfies with the duck lips, y'all are evil, right? Now here's why I bring this up. For some of us, for some of you, the Bible says the pure at heart see things purely, and the people who are corrupt. For some of you, it's hard to believe that there are people out there in this world that really want to hurt you. And I don't mean unintentionally like the foolish person, but they want to hurt you. So do not hope for a vindictive person to change. Now, it can happen, and it does, but it doesn't happen by giving in to them. It doesn't happen by reasoning with them, and it certainly doesn't happen by allowing them another chance to hurt you. You know when it happens, when an evil person finally changes? When something forces limits on them that they have to change. That's why jail is the only thing that works for some people. That's why restraining orders work for the evil, vindictive person. You talk to foolish people about the consequences, okay? You talk to wise people about their problems and they receive it. You talk to foolish people about consequences, but with vindictive people, you just say, you can communicate with my attorney. I'm no longer talking to you. Now, that's how you deal. Let me wrap this up. Unhooking can happen when you get to a good, hopeless place. And I say, you might say, how can hopeless be good? Because every relationship that's in one, there's a time when we need to get to that place, because not only does it force us to change, it forces us to force them to make a decision. Because many of the decisions they're making, their behavior isn't because of you. It's like that song she said, I had to watch out about how I talked about you when I was whatever. I had to change. You tried to make it feel like it was my fault. You can't live that way. And when you get to that hopeless time, it finally gives you clarity to see reality as it really is, that maybe there needs to be an ending to this relationship. Now, unfortunately, that involves people, and that is so tough to do. It is a difficult decision. It's one of the most difficult decisions that you're going to have to make. And we're going to make it all through our life, but you can't continue to live in a dysfunctional or abusive relationship, whether it be a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend. And listen, these things that I'm giving you, these will help you be a good character judge for someone that you're going to date or that you're getting in a relationship with. But making decisions like this should never be taken lightly. So it's crucial that you have a good radar. And I'm telling you, this radar right here will save you untold times of grief and sorrow and hurt and pain and wasted years of investing in a relationship that doesn't come around. If you have hope in someone who's in denial about their behavior, that's wasted time. Conversely, though, people can change. Given the right input, if they're wise and they're open to hear it, there can be great hope in many circumstances. But seeing the difference between the wise, the foolish, and the vindictive will help determine what stance and what route you need to take in making those difficult decisions. So, next week, because the staff has said that I need to take a week off, and I said I need to take a week off because of my father's death, Pastor Graham is going to be back here, and he's going to finish out this series. And I'm very excited about what he's going to talk about. You're going to love it. But let me just kind of, not warn you, but encourage you, because next week is Mother's Day. And if Easter is the Super Bowl of churches, then Mother's Day is like the college football championship of church, okay? So it's going to be busy here. Because what do mothers want to do? What do you want to do for Mother's Day? I want to go to church as a family and then wait 3 hours for a table at Beauchamp's. Okay, then we're going to do that. That's what we're going to do for Mother's Day, right? So I encourage you, next week, bring your mom, but you better get here early. We're going to have something special for your moms, all the moms out there. Get here early, get a seat, because it will be crowded. Mother's Day is typically the second or third largest attended Sunday that we have. You know, Easter and Christmas are the first two. So, might not be college football. So if Easter's the Super Bowl and Christmas is the college football, then maybe, so the college softball championship, I don't know, you figure it out. You come at me with some ideas of what it is. Anyway, let's pray. Worship was so, I wasn't super close to my father in the last 40 years. Last 6 months, we spent a lot of time together. And worship was amazing because I know my dad is in heaven worshiping right now because he received Jesus 2 weeks ago. And if I would have labeled my father out of one of these categories, when it comes to religion, I would say he was vindictive, he was hostile towards the gospel. But my sister never gave up. I'm going to be honest, I kind of quit talking to him about it. But my sister never gave up, and she prayed with him, and he received Jesus. So I'm just thankful that today he's up in heaven with him. And Lord, we're grateful for your care for us. God, thank you for your word. And let me just would you bow your heads and keep them bowed? I just want to say to you, maybe you're here and you're investigating or you're not sure about the God thing. Let me just say this. You don't have to believe what we believe to take this and use it, okay? If you're in a relationship or you're a boss or you can take these principles and you can use it as a radar for your life of diagnosing character, judging character judgments, and you can make good decisions. I'm telling you, it'll work for you. You don't have to be a Christ follower. But here's what I'll tell you. If you decide to do this and it works, can I just challenge you maybe that you would investigate other parts of the Bible? Because if this is true and it works 4,000 years later and it's still considered wisdom and knowledge that's good for life, because we say this all the time, following Jesus will make your life better and following Jesus will make you better at life. And if that's true, what else is in here that maybe you're discounting that is true? Because we always say this about Jesus. If anyone who can predict his death and resurrection and then pull it off, I think you need to listen to what he has to say. So Lord, we thank you for your word, that it is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. It gives us, it's like the satellite weather that tells us what's coming, but also tells us what's right here, the radar. Lord, thank you for your word, that it can transform us and it can give us wisdom for dealing with very, very difficult decisions and relationships. So Lord, we're grateful. We thank you for everything that you're doing. In Jesus' name, amen.